We're live. Hey, everybody, we're live. You can share it now. I'm Dr. Rob Silverman. How are you? I'm here with my good friend, colleague, one of the best healthcare practitioners I know, Dr. Ryan Cedermark.
What's up? Hey, Doc. Thanks so much for having me.
How are you doing? I'm excited to have you. It's really funny. I met Ryan a few years ago, and he has imbued me with enthusiasm to learn more about the brain than any one individual I've met. So let me tell everybody a little bit about you. Number one, Dr. Ryan Cedermark. He graduated magna cum laude from Life University in 2011. While you were in school, you're crazy, you enrolled in a postgraduate neurological course, earning your diploma in neurology from the American Chiropractic Board in 2013. Without question, you're passionate about learning and passionate about healthcare. You also graduated magna cum laude with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Duke University, and you've also completed a family nurse practitioner program at Georgia State University in 2018. I got a whole bunch more to talk about, but wow. So let me get this straight. You're a chiropractor, you're a nurse practitioner.
Yes, my wife won't let me go back to school.
Yeah, I heard there's a PhD, there's a master's, there may be another doctorate, all that kind of stuff.
I'm good. I was told I'm only allowed to Google it from now on, so no more school.
Yes, that's just like the patients. They get their degree from the University of Google. So we're happy to have you. Tell everybody just a little bit about you. I mean, I know the people on Brain Chat know you because now you're sort of like the guest as opposed to the host.
Yeah, thanks. My name's Ryan, and Dr. Silverman, I've always looked up to you as a colleague in our profession, and thank you so much for all you do. So I'm just happy to be here. But I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm currently working as a family nurse practitioner. When the pandemic happened, the group that I work with, they needed a greater need for medical services around here. So I started doing that a little bit more, but I'm also a chiropractor. And when I was in chiropractic school, I just became really intrigued with how things worked with the body from a holistic perspective. And I found those answers when I studied the brain. And so then, of course, I got really involved with studying the brain, learning the brain, and that's where my interests are. And my wife and I, we were flying back from Costa Rica at like a wellness retreat, and she was like, you need to like tell more people about the brain stuff. And someone else that we were working with down there was Sachin Patel, who founded the Living Proof Institute. And he was like, yeah, the stuff is cool, but no one knows what you're talking about. So that's how we started Brain Chat. And now life is a little bit busy with 2 kids, but I try to make a post a day on just things that I'm thinking about the brain.
Yeah, I follow the Brain Chat. So anybody who's tuning in, Brain Chat is a great resource. And you're growing really almost exponentially with, you're not even, people will understand you're not paying for people to watch. You're actually getting organic growth, which is unique because the information is so salient. But what I wanted to ask you was, I'm going to come right out of the gate. I'm going to hit you with something. What is this idea about this brain and neuroflexibility? So many people ask me about it.
Yeah, for me, understanding the brain and how the brain worked and how the brain is just so exposed to so many traumas throughout our lifetime, I really wanted to understand how we could build brain resilience. Because for me, working with patients, you realize that you're also a patient to some extent, and you have to take care of yourself and take care of your own brain. So basically with neuroflexibility, it's just the ability of the brain to adapt to its environment and build resilience in times of stress and in times where there's healthy things going on. So it's really just the brain's ability to be plastic, and that all falls back on neuroplasticity, which is another really cool concept that's a new thing, which people don't really know either.
Yeah, you know what? I hear so many people talk about neuroplasticity, and as soon as they hear the word, they assume that's positives. And we could just segue into like a concussion as an example. Is neuroplasticity always positive post a concussion? Or explain what neuroplasticity is and when it's positive, let's say, when it's negative.
Yeah, neuroplasticity, which this was, so, when I learned based on the principles of neuroplasticity on how to heal the brain and how to treat the body. But what I didn't realize was that neuroplasticity, it's a newer concept that wasn't really well regarded in medical schools up until like the mid 1900s, which was crazy to me because I thought it had been around forever. But with neuroplasticity, it's basically the brain's ability to be able to adapt and change throughout our lifetime. So it can be good and it can be bad. Stressful events can create what's called like negative plasticity, which can create negative changes to the brain. And then good healthy habits, good environmental interactions can cause positive neuroplasticity or positive changes to the brain. So just like anything, there's a good and a bad to it. And for me, what I tell patients, the goal is always to try to tip the scales just a little bit more positive than negative on a daily basis. And, hopefully over time that builds enough efficiency in the brain and in the body that positive things are happening for you.
So that shapeable, you got a big shout out. I got to stop. Dr. Ryan is definitely giving the most modern understanding of medicine. You've got
what's up? What's up, Doc? Thank you.
That's great. So nice. So we were going to talk about stress, but since I got you on neuroplasticity, and then I'll segue into stress. So neuroplasticity, brain-derived neurotrophic factors, something that's a critical element. It's a protein enzyme that allows for neuroplasticity. Let's just briefly talk a little bit about how we can generate BDNF and why that's so important.
Yeah, I think there's so many ways to generate nerve growth factors for our bodies and for our brains. And for me, I think the best thing that you could do, that anyone can do, and we should all do, is do some form of exercise. And I know that it gets very specific, and there's research out there that shows that there's specific exercises that can specifically drive nerve growth factor pathways better than others. But honestly, in the world that we're living in nowadays, people have jobs where realistically they're sitting all day and not doing much. You wake up, you get in your car, you drive to work, you get out of your car, you sit at the desk, you get up, you drive home, and then you're, by the time you're home and everything's ready, you're getting ready for bed. So incorporating some sort of exercise in your daily life is, I think, the most important and best way to drive nerve growth factors and create positive plasticity in the brain.
Agreed. Exercise. And it's so funny that we talk about that because a lot of head trauma, concussion, let's say, a lot of docs, not in our genre, say to rest. And we know that the BDNF, especially steady state exercise, is going to generate that BDNF. So I think we skate on that. There's more that we can talk about, but I got a question that someone sent in because we were supposed to talk about stress. I want to get to it. So they just texted it into me. What do people usually think of when they hear the word stress?
So I just wrote a little blog post about this on my Facebook page, and I think you think of stress, right? You think of like life in general, the chaos that we're all entangled in life. And I think, the pandemic this past year gave us a whole new definition of stress. But I think in general, people think negatively when they think of stress. And for the most part, that's a pretty normal thing to think about. But there's also positive stress that we can put on our systems and on our body and on our brain that can help build a healthier brain. But yeah, I wrote like, you go to work, work's crazy, you have your boss shouting at you, you get home, there's chores to do, your kids are like screaming, they want the TV on, you haven't eaten yet. And then you like finally get to bed and then remember, you haven't even sat down to use the bathroom all day. To me, that's like a stressful day. But there's all different kinds of stress.
I just put in the last one. As you guys can see, I'm a one-finger typer.
Nice.
Here we go. What are other ways stress affects our body?
So again, like going back to what people typically think, I think, we think of the stress hormone cortisol, and cortisol is something that's eventually released by our adrenal glands from signaling from the brain. And anything in physiology within our body, there's supposed to be a positive negative feedback loop. So when the body has enough of what it's asking for, then it should shut that pathway or system down. But in times of chronic stress, systems and pathways can become unregulated, and that can wreak havoc on our bodies and on our brains. And my question was always, okay, what is stress doing to the brain itself? And come to find out, just with a little bit of research, the brain is really shut down in times of chronic stress. And stress will impact really, really important areas of the brain. A lot of people probably know like the hippocampus, which is very important for memory and storing short and long-term memory. It becomes shut down. So you start to lose those memory pathways. But even more importantly, the prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of our brain, which really makes us human and allows us to act like civilized human beings, begins shut down in times of chronic stress exposure, which can explain a lot of, why people act out and thrash out in times of very, very stressful events. So to me, that's the most interesting thing, is that stress with chronic stress exposure that goes unregulated, it just shuts down the most important part of our brain, in my opinion, which can be pretty scary.
Well, we get a question. Melanie said, how can one build up their cortisol levels?
Well, so with cortisol, that's kind of a tricky question. Because, in times of chronic stress exposure, cortisol isn't something you necessarily want to build up. You more so want to have a healthy balance of cortisol levels. But I don't know, maybe you want to answer that one?
I think what she meant was I think she meant maybe how can you lower it? And let's start with, when is cortisol highest in the morning, and how could we lower cortisol and the benefits of lowering cortisol in that stress pathway that we were referring to?
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. So cortisol, it plays a lot of very important physiological roles, and not all cortisol is bad cortisol. It's just when cortisol goes unchecked is when it gets a little bit crazy. But in the morning, we're supposed to have a higher cortisol response to get us up, to get us moving and grooving. And as you said, throughout the day, we're supposed to have that dip in our cortisol profile. And at night, it's supposed to be pretty low so that our melatonin can raise and we can start to chill out and shut down and rest and relax. But, people with changes in their cortisol physiology, they may have low cortisol in the morning and it may fluctuate throughout the day. So one thing that I found that's super effective in bumping cortisol in the morning is doing exercises to actually boost what's called your cortisol awakening response. That's CAR. So you got to give a boost to your car. And the way you do that is with just short physical exercise that creates some sort of heart rate increase. So like a short hit exercise, high intensity exercise, like getting down and doing 20 or 30 push-ups before you go to brush your teeth or before you go to use the bathroom, or just doing a couple of body weight squats, something as simple as that. That can boost it. And then at night, there's so many ways that we should regulate our cortisol and shut it down. One would be chilling out with the blue screen, Bluetooth, blue light, all that stuff, and picking up a book, setting some dim candles or lights in the house and things of that nature. But yeah.
So you're saying people try and live a stress-free life?
I have yet to find that. I think everybody stress is there, right? Like, I don't think you're living if you don't experience stress in some form or fashion, no matter who you are or where you are.
So somebody asked about the HPA axis in brain health, its effect.
What about it?
Well, I think what they were saying is when that axis, when it's adversely affected, what essentially is an overview of
so with the HPA axis, so that's when stress response hits the brain sends a signal to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland tells the adrenal glands to shoot out some cortisol. But once there's enough cortisol in the bloodstream, the brain should get a signal and say, all right, cool. Thanks so much. The stressful event is over. There's enough cortisol in the system to take care of business, shut it down and relax and reboot. But the problem is with chronic stress exposure, those systems can get messed up, especially the front part of the brain. The front part of the brain can lose the signal from that peripheral cortisol chilling out in the bloodstream, and then it can't stop releasing it. So there's some sort of like override mechanism that happens, and you continue to dump out cortisol, which can have a negative impact. Another thing too is when you have chronic cortisol exposure in your body, that can disrupt the microbiome. And as you know, our system, it's so important that it's set up with barrier systems. And two of the most important barrier systems that I can think about are the gut barrier and the brain barrier. And with chronic stress exposure, there's going to be a breakdown in the barriers. It's almost like if you had, this is the example I always use, but if you're hanging out on a screened-in porch, a nice sunny day, a nice gentle breeze, and then there's a little cut in the screen, all these mosquitoes start flying in and ruining your afternoon. That's kind of what happens when you have breakdowns in those barrier systems. Stuff gets into the gut that shouldn't be there. Stuff gets into the brain that shouldn't be there. It causes inflammation. Things go unchecked, and this perpetual cycle just keeps happening, and there's no way to shut it down.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk all about the gut to brain axis, but I think we'll be here for an hour and a half, and you're on a time limit because you have a new patient. But the idea of those barriers are very poignant in the fact that they're both single layer epithelial cells, and the most prominent one that you probably wanted to talk about is the blood-brain barrier, which
Yeah.
filters 400 miles of arteries, and once it gets inside the blood-brain barrier or pierces it or becomes too permeable, it's neuroinflammation. But we have a question that segued from something you just said. So here we go. How can you rebuild gray and white matter in the brain?
Okay. Well, man, there's a lot of questions here. Why are you guys asking me all these hard questions? No, I'm just kidding. The best way, I mean, honestly, it always goes. So our brain and bodies were built to move. So if you're looking at rebuilding gray and white matter in the brain, you have to perform some sort of physical movement or physical exercise every day throughout the day. But then you also have to make sure that you're creating an anti-inflammatory environment for your brain to thrive in and for your body to thrive in. So reducing inflammatory foods, making sure that the people that you're hanging out with in your environment isn't a stressful, inflammatory environment is also really, really important. And the neurotransmitter communication from gut to brain is really, really, really important. And you lose that communication in several different pathways and mechanisms when there's chronic stress exposure via different messenger signaling, via disruption of what's called the vagus nerve. All that can kind of get shut down with chronic stress exposure. But again, for me, it always goes back to some sort of physical movement or exercise because our brain evolutionarily was built and it became so complex with complex movements.
Great answer. So I wrote one more down while you were just talking, giving a great answer. Why is it important to have a plan in place to respond to chronic life stressors? Everybody's going to want to know. Give them your checklist.
Yes. So my mom, I think she said this to me. I forget where and when I was. It was several years ago, but it was something to the effect of, you know, our brains are basically like little boats out to sea every day. You wake up, you're getting ready to set sail. And if you don't have a map and know where you're going throughout the day, you're kind of just wading in the water, right? You're kind of just going with the flow, going where it takes you. But if you wake up and every day you have a plan of action, then that is something that's really important for your brain because your brain kind of knows where it's going. Obviously, things can happen, right? If you're sailing along, there could be a thunderstorm and you can get thrown off course, but you still know where you're supposed to go. So I always think every day, and this might sound a little monotonous or kind of like minutia to people, but I think every day waking up with a goal of where you're going to every day is really, really important because things will get thrown off course. Your life will get thrown off course. But I always think it's remembered to be able to have some sort of focus on that end goal of where you want to go. And then also building resilience to the stressor and how you perceive the stressor is so, so important for your brain because a lot of times things aren't as bad as our brain may make it up to be. Sometimes our brain will try to create this false reality of some situation. And sometimes we'll even live through the stressor twice. We'll kind of like stress about it and then it'll actually happen. And doing that alone can really just screw up some of our stress pathways. So I think it's really important to kind of wake up every day, know where you're going, knowing that if you do get off course throughout your day and stressors are thrown at you, it's going to be okay. And just have some sort of plan of action to kind of recalibrate and re-navigate the ship.
Somebody's interested in how they can follow you on Facebook.
Check out, we have our Facebook page called Brain Chat. We just had a second kid, so I haven't done too many of these lives anymore because by the time I get home, we're like busy with the kiddos until late. But Brain Chat, I try to post daily about brain health and neuroscience news. And then we like to have guests like Dr. Silverman on there when the time allows. So please, follow us and follow Dr. Silverman as well. Well, I guess you are.
You're on my life. I know it's getting close to the time that you got to bolt. So I want to ask you about AFNER. Could you tell some people about what AFNER is? You're involved. I know we're having an upcoming symposium, I think in October. So could you let docs who are listening know all about it?
And we're lucky enough, we locked you in as a speaker. Woo woo. AFNER. So AFNER was started about 12 years ago. And within our chiropractic community, we have a lot of us have studied neurology and functional neurology and neuro rehab to help the brain heal. So this group was started by Dr. Robert Malillo, who's an amazing colleague and friend. And it started out as a research group, and we still have researchers that are committed to the group, but we also just teach brain applications to help build better brains for ourselves and for our patients. So it's an interdisciplinary group. We have lots of chiropractors, physical therapists, some medical doctors that are doing brain-based therapy in the office every day. And that's our group. And every year we have a yearly symposium. The past 2 years, this past year and this year, it'll be virtual. But if you just go to iafnr.org, our conference is every year in October. This year it's virtual. Whether you're a practitioner or a patient, you could learn a lot. And feel free to message us on there. Janice Hughes, Dr. Hughes, is our executive director, and she will get back to you with any questions that you have. If not, I can always do it too.
Yeah, we'll put that in the thread when we get off. So I'll give you a real quick plug. AFNER is great, and to piggyback on what you said, without question, it's great for patients. It's great for docs. It's great for the doc who's a functional neurologist. It's also good for the doc who's doing proprioception and somebody who wants to learn, because you really run the full gamut. And as we all know, if our brain isn't functioning well, our body isn't functioning. It's one of the only organs, if not the only organ, that we can't live without. Although there are a couple 100%. Of people that we've talked about doing pretty well without one, but we won't go there. You know, we're trying to keep it well forward.
Yeah, that has always been my interest. Is, when we start to lose the brain, everything else starts to kind of trickle down. It has this trickle down effect. So I think if we focus a little bit more on our brain health, because we are, we focus on a lot of specific areas in medicine and chiropractic, but I think there has been less of a focus on how healthy our brains are. So I just think it's so important that, we always kind of keep that in the back of our head or in our brain, that brain health is just something that's really important, because when we lose our brains, we lose ourselves. So
in closing, three key stress takeaways that everybody can use tomorrow to keep their stress decreased.
Okay, so these are my go-tos, and this happened to me. Like I did a little presentation on stress at the beginning of the pandemic, because I was like, what kind of stress is this? This is crazy. But 3 key takeaways. I think if you're not doing some sort of physical exercise, and me personally, I think you have to do something that makes you happy and that's not a extremely stressful task. So a lot of people, sometimes they think if you're going to get into some sort of exercise routine, you got to be like a CrossFitter or an Olympic athlete. But just getting outside, going for a walk on a daily basis, but then starting to push yourself a little bit is really, really important. I start my morning out every morning, and this may sound silly, but like I always write down 10 things I'm grateful for, because I really do think that gratitude neuroplastically can help change the brain for the better. So I always try to write down things that I'm grateful for in the past, present, and future. And I do that every morning. And then last but not least, you're a New Yorker, so just forget about it.
There you go. Let it roll down your back.
Exactly. I think you can only let it stress you so much. Things are going to always work out in the end. And if you just stay focused on where you want to go, good things will happen. So,
well, we got an amen to that.
Amen.
Amen. Nothing better. So anybody want to follow him, Dr. Ryan Cedermark, AFNER, Brain Chat is the website. He's posting great stuff every day. Any questions that you see on Memorex when you watch this later, put them in the thread. We'll answer them. Doc, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being here.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to your book.
You got it. And you got it. I appreciate you being one of the expert editors. I really do.
Oh, no way, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks so much. Everybody, Dr. Rob, Dr. Ryan, we'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.